Hello, I'm Bishop William Medley of the Diocese of Owensboro, welcoming you again to an extraordinary edition of Across the Diocese. I am in St. Stephen Cathedral, and I'm in St. Stephen Cathedral for a reason, in that what I want to talk about today is to invite Catholics back to public worship, effective May 20th. Churches may reopen. Now, some churches may not be able to, some of our Catholic churches may not be able to do that on that day. There may be circumstances with the church. There may be circumstances in local communities across Western Kentucky. But the permission for churches to begin to reopen, to begin to have public masses, is effective May 20th. Thank you for your patience. I have received emails and cards and letters and phone calls from people wanting to know, when can we come back to church? When can I receive Holy Communion again? And each of those has touched my heart because I know what all those things mean to any Christian, to any Catholic in the practice of their faith. So I'm pleased to be doing this, but it's not like we're back to normal. It's not like we turn the clock back to March 1st and everybody fills up the church and we do things like we always did. We are still dealing with the effects of a worldwide pandemic. And we as Christian people have to be mindful of that. And we have to accept some restrictions that will go along with that. I've got some notes because there's a lot of things I want to cover today so that I don't forget anything. First, be clear that the suspension of the obligation for Catholics to attend Mass on Sundays and holy days continues. That suspension continues. These are extraordinary times. This is an extraordinary action of the Church, and for a bishop to tell Catholics, you don't have to be at church on Sunday, because that's an age-old principle. But under these times and circumstances, it seems prudent to let people make up their own minds. I will also encourage people to consider, as there's not an obligation to be at Mass on Sunday, for those who genuinely want to get to church and want to go to Mass, look at the calendar, the schedule of Masses Monday through Friday in your parish. And perhaps it would be possible for you or you and your family to attend Mass at those times, leaving the Sunday slots a little less crowded and open to those who can't make the weekdays. I want to make a special appeal to the frail and the fragile and the elderly who should not be coming out at this time. There's just so much that's still not known about this COVID-19 virus. We all have a responsibility to be good stewards of our own health and not put ourselves in peril. And sometimes those people, the frail and the elderly, are the ones most captivated by that obligation to come to church. Let me make clear, you can, with a clear conscience, continue what you've been doing. Tuning in to the TV or the radio or however you're observing your prayers, please continue to do that. Don't do anything foolish. Some of the restrictions we'll face, in accord with guidelines from the Office of the Governor of Kentucky, there will be occupancy limits for churches. At the very least, in any church you come in, that's probably going to mean that every other pew is marked off and cannot be used. And then there will be the expectation of physical distancing, that you not be, even within a pew, closer than 6 feet to the person next to you. Now, this will not apply to families who are coming to church together who live in the same household. They can continue to gather in one pew. Now, how churches are going to enforce this occupancy, we had a Zoom meeting with our pastors recently. This causes them a lot of anxiety. Do we have to tell people they can't come in when the church is full? Yes. Now, churches are talking about issuing tickets, giving you an alphabetical guide as to when you or your family can come to church, all sorts of ways to, so you need to check with your local parish to find that out. And please be gracious if you get to church and somebody has to tell you, sorry, you can't get into this Mass. No one wants to tell you that, but this is what's necessary for the common good right now. There will be a requirement that anyone who comes and participates in the Mass must wear a facial covering. both to enter the church and the whole time they're there. Anyone over the age of 2. If you find that impossible or intolerable, I'm going to ask you at this time to continue to participate in worship from home. We're trying to protect one another. Again, the physical distancing will be important. I don't know whether parishes are going to measure that off or just trust us to use common sense, but try to be cooperative. If someone has to tell you or remind you to put your mask on or to spread out a little more, or maybe even don't come into church, they're not trying to be mean. They're not trying to be authoritarian. They're trying to take care of you and others. Holy Communion will be offered. There will be instructions on how to come forward to receive Holy Communion and to keep distance. One will continue to wear their facial covering until they receive the host. But all that will be explained when you're in church. And then at the end of Mass, instructions will be given on how to safely exit to avoid crowded bottlenecks, and then to encourage people to go from the church directly to their cars. As much as we're all longing for that social interaction, let's not let church be the place that we get sick or we spread that. I realize that some may not see the importance or agree with some of these guidelines. Who's the governor to tell us what to do? Well, all of our guidelines do adhere to what the governor's guidelines call for. But I want to make a point that we do these not because the governor says so or the president says so or a judge says so. These guidelines we're enacting, we're asking your cooperation because this is a matter of Christian charity. This is a matter of imitating Jesus Christ. This is a matter of caring for our neighbor. So if we look at it through that prism, if we look at it through that lens, the restrictions that maybe make us a little bit uncomfortable or that we simply don't agree with may be a little bit easier to handle. It's clear that there's a lot that is still not known about the COVID-19 virus, and especially how it's transmitted from person to person. And so our guidelines we may find out they were excessive, although nothing that's happened up to now would suggest that these common sense guidelines are anything but absolutely necessary. Patience and kindness will go a long way in making these guidelines work and keeping everybody smiling. Public weddings and funerals may be celebrated again as of May 20th, but they must be in accord with these guidelines: occupancy, wearing facial covering, and keeping distancing. Social gatherings and educational gatherings apart from the Mass will still be restricted until more is known or until we further flatten the curve of incidences in our communities. Churches with the capacity to live stream their services are encouraged to continue to do so. I want to say again, this May 20th date represents permission for us to come for worship again. Some parishes can't do that. Some pastors may have to prudently decide that they cannot preside at Mass because of their own health issues, and I have assured them that I will support them 100% in that. So again, be patient. I don't know of a priest who isn't aching to be back at the altar, to be back in the pulpit, to be calling people to worship. How long will these restrictions stay in place? Well, that's the question I've been asking from day one. Just tell me when it's over and I can handle anything. But nobody can answer that. There's still a lot to be known about all of this. So what do we do in the meantime? Whether you're able to come back to church or whether you're still at home, continue to pray to the Lord for mercy. Pray to our Blessed Mother that she will watch over us and watch over our church. Pray especially. We know how this COVID-19 virus has affected our country, has wrecked our economy, has left many of you, and I understand maybe as many as 40% of Kentuckians, out of work. Our government is in a position to help us. Be mindful of your neighbor, but let's be mindful in our prayer, particularly of people in places in the world where there is no safety net, where there is not the medical care the health care that we enjoy here in this country, because as this virus passes through countries like that, it's going to be devastating, far more devastating than we've experienced here. So I thank you. I've gotten many, many notes and letters as well telling me, Bishop, we're praying for you because we know that a lot of decisions are coming back to you. Thank you. Those prayers have meant a lot to me. Every single day since March 17th, when I stopped having public masses, apart from the live stream mass here at St. Stephen, I have said a private mass. And I want you to know, every single one of you were around my altar. I prayed for you. I have confidence that you were praying for me. I have confidence, certainly, that the Lord is with us. In a few days, we will be celebrating the Feast of Pentecost. And I always recall that Pentecostal moment when the apostles were locked in the room. The doors were locked, the windows were sealed, and Jesus came and stood in their midst. And he breathed on them and he said, "Peace be with you. Receive the Holy Spirit." Walls and windows and physical distancing did not keep Jesus away in a miraculous way there. But we are not beyond the reach of God's love. We never have been, and we never will be. So let's continue to pray for one another. I hope that you are among those who can come to church, but make a wise decision. God be with you. Thank you.